The Sound Off Podcast. The show about podcast and broadcast. Starts now.
Stephen Keppler is the morning show host at Move 1015 in Kelowna. If you're a regular listener of this show, you'll know that I think Kelowna is one of the best markets in Canada to spend some time doing radio. There were some serious forest fires over there this summer, and radio played a significant role in keeping people informed and safe. And they did it in the face of Facebook suppressing news. I'll just cut right to the lesson. Live radio is better than Facebook. Stephen is going to tell us about his career and even his early years in Edmonton, where he grew up listening to radio in one of the most competitive markets in Canada. Now, Stephen Keppler joins me from his vacation home in Whistler, British Columbia, where I'm examining and scrutinizing his microphone setup. What would you do with an iRig on remote? How does that work?
So we can actually take this on remote easily if you have the remote software, just the app, and the Record It Live app. And all you would do, I mean, in Edmonton or where other stations, you just upload via FTP. But actually with Record It Live, you can upload or you can connect directly into the board, and then an op will record you.
Where'd you go to high school? Was it in Edmonton?
Yeah, Jasper Place High School. Not far from where you worked at the Bear. So I went there to high school from 2000 to 2003. I think you were at the Bear, I want to say late 90s, early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we drove by that station all the time. All the time in my 91, what was it called? Shoot. Plymouth Sundance? No. Sunbird? No, that was my brother's car. Yeah, just our piece of crap cars.
Yeah, and I'm reminded, I know exactly where that high school is. I don't know why. I know it's off 163th Street.
Yeah, right next to St. FX. So there was two high schools on that giant city block there. And our lives were at the mall. So I lived in Lewis Estates at the time. And we had moved there from British Columbia. And so Edmonton was my first taste of taking the city bus in a big city for me at the time. And boy, did I cut my teeth there as a young football player. And it was a good high school to go to. What's really strange, though, is my niece just started grade 10 there last week. And so it's just bringing back all the memories.
I remember Lewis Estates for its very cool golf course. And my buddy Gordon Giles, who I played soccer with, had a place down there. I doubt he still lives there. Maybe he still does, but that was my only ventures into Lewis Estates. Actually, there were a few soccer players that I played with who had houses in there. It was all new back then. It's not new anymore.
Yeah, it was brand new then. Now there's the River Cree and there's about 5 other surrounding neighborhoods with the Hamptons. Like my wife and I, we moved back to Edmonton when I got a job there working for Chorus. And we bought in a neighborhood that was Winterburn. I think it was right next to Winterburn School. But it was a farmland when I was in high school. And then moving back, it's just like this urban sprawl.
And you really were a mall kid because you had an early gig working the Boston Pizza at the mall.
How'd you know that?
I do my research, my friend.
That is funny. Actually, my brother started working there when he was 16. He was a busser. And I was in between gigs as an actor. And I got a job working there because we knew the management. Like I know the owner, Troy Houseworth, one of the nicest guys you'll ever hang out with. And he owns a couple of BPs now. That was such a fun gig because you met so many different people and interesting people from across the world. Like people from the Netherlands trying to order a barbecue chicken pizza when they kept saying pork or like, and you just have to learn how to be a communicator. And it was a cool job. Yeah.
Was Hooters still in the mall? Is Hooters still in the mall?
Hooters is gone, but it was when I was there. But now it's called First Round. It's like a bar. Yeah, it's like a sports pub. So they have a lot more TVs now, and it's less scandalous, I guess. I don't know. Hooters. We went there in high school. We ordered like the cheapest stuff on the menu and be just gross. Yeah.
You're not the first Edmonton actor to appear on this show. Because Christian Zip, who's a longtime CJSR guy, and you're nodding your head. Do you know of this individual?
I know of Christian Zip. I don't think we've ever met, which is crazy because we've been in that community. We were both in that, like the theater community and a little bit of the film community as well. So it's like crazy how many actors will get into broadcasting, because I think it just comes natural, like being natural comes natural to us.
CJSR is his radio gig. He's had it for 25 years, but his claim to fame with me is how we met. And I'll just tell people to roll back in the episodes and go listen to that 90-minute episode of his story, which is a rather incredible Edmonton story of how he got meningitis and he lost his limbs, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I mentioned that because we also played soccer together as well.
Wow.
Yeah. That's it. Again, he's never worked for a radio station. I mean, we count CJSR though, right? Because it's a good.
I count CJSR because there's so many people who talk about, like, it's got like this cult following in Edmonton. And if you live in Edmonton and you don't know what CJSR is, then I guess you haven't lived in Edmonton long enough. There's, you know what, Derek Scott, he's a guy I met in Kelowna, and he's back in Edmonton, and he wants to get this old radio show he had with his buddy Thero. And it was called Evil Petting Zoo. And they played all sorts of like just like rap, like indie rap and really unique stuff. And that's why I like CJSR, because they play whatever they want. Like you could almost say they were one of the last stations to have disc jockeys, right? Like where they play whatever they wanted and what they were feeling at the time.
My first weekend in Edmonton in 1994, I took a look to see what was going on, and it was the Fringe Festival. And that's a big deal for anybody who's an actor in Edmonton. It's the Super Bowl of Fringe festivals yeah, it's big. It's good.
It's the second largest Fringe festival in the world, next to the Edinburgh Fringe. And it's a riot. Like, if you're not performing in the Fringe, what you do is you go down to the beer tent, you hang out and you meet some artists, you hang out with some friends, and then you just go to shows. And it doesn't really matter what show you see because everything is unique and different. Like, I performed in the Fringe in a children's show, and I remember a mob of friends coming to see it just because they were bored in the afternoon, and they came, and it was like you're performing, like you felt like a rock star. And then other times you go to the Fringe at like 10 o'clock at night and you think everything's winding up. Well, no, there's a 12:30 showing of Bat Boy the Musical at La Cité Francophone. And you're like, yeah, let's go. Let's check it out. And you're blown away at this unique musical that you've never even heard of before, only knew through tabloids, right?
Do you have a story from the Black Dog Free House you want to share?
I don't think so. I don't think I have been to the Black Dog since I saw Mostly Water Theater perform there. Unless you dug up some random story about me being there.
No, I just wanted to know if it still was what it was and is what it is, because that's where I hung out.
I think the Black Dog is done. I don't know. Like, I went to the Black Dog when I was fresh 18 to go listen to live music. That's all I really remember from it. And you'd go to, I think it was Squires. I think Squires was around then. And a couple of those other pubs who I think they're all like gone. Which is, that's the nature of White Ave.
So you're acting, Fringe, Jasper High School, and then your first experience with radio, I want to say, is Astral up on Stony Plain Road.
No. So I toured through Western Canada as an actor. So I did Jubilation's Dinner Theater in West Ed Mall there. And we went to Winnipeg and we did shows at Celebration's Dinner Theater. And we'd go to Calgary and do shows there. And then I was doing film and television for a while. I actually have a pretty cool story about how I kind of started to get interested in radio. I was doing a indie project, and it was a Star Wars fan film. Now, I don't want to get into who was the director because I think that's a long, long story. But I met Fearless Fred. He and I did a scene together. And we just kind of shot the shit. And what I loved about Fred was just how natural he was. And I was like, dude, you're really killing this. He's like, cool, I've never acted before, yada, yada, And we had like 2 or 3 lines. It was very basic, but it was a Star Wars fan film. And if you know Fred, you'd be like, that is on point. And he was working for the Bear at the time. And I was a starving actor. Like I was what some would say successful because I was in 2 Oscar-nominated films, but that doesn't mean you're an amazing actor. It just means you saw a little bit of success. So I remember seeing Fred leave with like a decent car. And I said, dude, what do you do for a living? And he's like, I'm in radio. And then we started chatting and I started listening to his show. I'd call in the odd time, but then, life happened. And my girlfriend at the time, my now wife, we moved to Vancouver. And that's when I started doing real film auditions, like for bigger movies. And I was like trying to make it. Like this was 100 pounds ago. I was basically like hauled into these cattle calls to be like the next Edward from Twilight. And I looked around the room and I went, I'm not as good as these guys, but I'm really good at being myself. And then that's when I just overnight enrolled to be in Columbia Academy in Vancouver. And so AJ Junup and Dave Smith kind of guided me along the path of what it's like to be a radio announcer across Canada. And then out of nowhere, I started working so my first radio experience per se was actually for Astral. So you were right there in Richmond, which was Virgin Radio at the time, Shore 104. And I already forget what the AM station was, but that station was ran by Ronnie Stanton and Taylor Jukes. Like they are so successful now. And then I just kind of would do whatever anyone needed. I was the promo team, street team. But I did more than that. I went in, I said, I would go in on days where I wasn't doing anything. I said, do you guys need anything done? And I would just go out and do it. And it was pretty cool to learn from like Nat and Drew and Scooter, Aaron Davis, Crosby McWilliam, like so many really cool people working in that building.
Tell me the difference between acting and being on the radio. I've always said that if you could be on the radio, you need to be yourself. But if you're acting, you have to play the role of something completely different. Is that fair? Did I get that right?
It just depends on what kind of an actor you are. Like every role I play is an extension of myself. So while you're right, I think it's not as cut and dry as that. Like I tackled a role last year, so I still act. I don't do it professionally per se, but I still get paid for it. But last year we did SpongeBob the Musical, and I had to tap into my inner Patrick Star. And so just trying to like find my way around that role, I was like, okay, well, what part of me is that kind of person in a vegetative, not a vegetative state, but like somebody who is just kind of mindless. And so I kind of tapped into a piece of myself where I'm able to shut my brain off. And it's kind of funny I say that because you're always paying attention on stage, but there's certain roles you play where your eyes need to say that they're glazed over. And so I was definitely Patrick Star. My closest friends were like, oh, Kep, you were so Keppler at this moment in your life. And they point out those things, which is really cool. So while you're right, I mean, I don't think there's a wrong answer to that statement either. Like, there's nothing wrong about it. So, yeah, I guess.
You've also done a number of roles in radio. You mentioned marketing, but you've also sold.
Yes. That was my first job.
Tell me about the sales experience.
So, when I was in Vancouver, I was faced with an opportunity. So, it was to stay with Astral, which had been purchased by Bell. And Ronnie had offered me overnights at Virgin Radio Vancouver. And so did Taylor. They kind of pulled me into their office and it was pretty exciting. And I was actually going to fill in as a producer for Scooter when he was away. So I was definitely making my way up the ranks. But I believe you need to go cut your teeth. I believe you need to go somewhere and fail. I believe you need to learn as many jobs as you possibly can in this industry. To make yourself a Swiss Army knife. So a job had popped up for Astral Bell in Golden, BC, and it was sales and on-air mornings. And I went, okay, that's a morning show. We need that. Can I do sales? And I thought, well, I'm passionate about the product. I need to learn. What better way for me to go to a market size of 3,000 people and just go and kind of fail every day and learn every day and become something greater, because I think it was great. Like Golden was the hardest job I ever worked in radio. You wake up, you do your morning show, and then after you're out there hoofing it, going to mom and pop shops. This isn't like going to a business where they have all the money to spend on their advertising. No, you're going to mom and pop shops and you're selling ads for $2 a spot so that they'll buy enough that they'll spend $95 a week for a month, right? So look at that, $400 a month is actually a lot for a guy who owns his own shoe store, or Doug Baralt, who owns Baralt Furnishings, or the Sears outlet store. I mean, we had there's something about it, but also working there taught me, because I was out there in the community so much, it kind of just ingrained in me that you not to sell ads, you need to be out there and you need to be with people. You can't just be sitting in your studio wasting your time there. You need to be out there connecting with people. And so I was never the greatest radio host out of Golden ever. Chris Cameron, in my opinion, is and was. He was the guy who was there before me, and he was awesome. But I think I'm never going to be the best radio host, but what I'm going to be is your best friend. I'm going to hang out with you, and you're going to remember me. And I think that's like a big key takeaway that I had from Golden. And we had some major successes there. One day they got nominated for one of those craft $100,000 contests from TSN, where if they got enough votes, they would get a new rink, or $100,000.
Oh, the Hockeyville.
Yes, thank you. Hockeyville was a different one. But they're all relatively the same. So I rallied the town for 2 weeks straight. I was out there handing out flyers saying, hey, vote, vote, vote. I sold a remote to the grocery store, and it was my first remote ever. And I was there in front of the pop, all the pop in front of me. And I was just saying, vote, vote, vote. They ended up winning. And it was really cool to see this town come together. This tiny little town of 3,000 people beat Revelstoke and beat Salmon Arm and beat Vernon a little bit. It was just really cool to see. So, and again, that was like my first taste of, okay, radio is powerful. You just need to be out there working with people. You can't just sit back and hope they come to you, right?
And then after Golden, did you go to Newcap?
Yes, I went to Brooks, Alberta to be a music director and morning host. And that was a fun station because I got to program the music the way I saw fit. Jeff Murray, man, that guy, he was so awesome to me. And same with John Petrie, he's the station manager. But Jeff Murray he let me just go. He was like, yeah, just do what you think is right. Go fail. Go have fun. And he really made radio fun for me.
And how long after it was it before the Brooks station began to get amalgamated into, other Newcap properties? And was that during your stint?
No, I was only in Brooks for 9 months. And then Abby White pulled me up to work at KG Country to take over for Greg Shannon had already left, and Tara Lee was still there. And Tara Lee just decided she needed a break from radio. And so they gave me the chair, basically. And I wasn't there too long. It was a pretty short stint because Chorus came calling after about 3 months in Red Deer. Edmonton was always on my list of radio markets to work in, and not because it was home, but because Edmonton is the most competitive radio market in North America, I believe. And I could be totally wrong. You could argue with me, but in my eyes at the time, I was like, I need to go somewhere and start competing and start learning that side of the business. So I wasn't in Red Deer for very long before Chorus came calling. Ronnie and Greg Johnson came calling, and they said, hey, we got an afternoon drive position open at 92.5 Fresh Radio. Why don't you come up and work for us? And I was like, Power 92, let's go.
Isn't it amazing? So many people would still call it Power 92 after all these years. And they probably even called up and gave the phrase that pays as well.
Oh, absolutely. Power 92 plays today's best music. Now show me my money. That was on people's answering machines. It was everywhere when I was in, junior high school in Edmonton. So to work at that station was like, okay, this is awesome. And the cluster there, it was really cool because you had Kissin' Country and 630 Ched there as well. So it was what a neat building to work at.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact address of the building. I think it's something like 63 Avenue and 90. Anyway,
Roper Road.
Thank you, Roper Road.
Yeah, just it's this giant warehouse of a radio station. It's awesome.
Yeah, and lots of talent having passed through that building over so many years, and you're at a heritage frequency at 92.5 and trucking along nicely. Did you get to do music there as well?
I was an assistant music director. because I kind of said I'd like to continue to learn Music Master. But when I got there, we were using RDS Selector, so I had to learn how to use that. And I don't think any other station uses RDS Selector now, but I know how to use it, which is great. I don't know if that's going to be helpful in 20 years, but learning as many programs as you can always helps. So yeah, Paul O'Neill was the music director when I was there, and Paul O'Neill is a radio encyclopedia. Like, that guy knows about every station, about every frequency, who worked there, when they flip formats. Like, he's a knowledgeable radio guy. And he really showed me that there's so many more passionate people about the business, and I love that. Paul was just so fun to work with.
And what's it like working back in your hometown?
It was cool, because you had old friends from high school who text the radio station and say, "Is this Keppler?" And I say, "Yes." And they say, like, Keppler, the guy who ran down the high school hallways in his full football gear and like tried to fake tackle people. I'm like, "Yeah, that's me. And it's just one of those things where your brothers are proud of you, your family's proud of you, and you feel something about being in your hometown. You know the town. So when you get on the air, the first time you crack the mic, you already know what's going on in town. You already know what's going on in people's minds as they're driving home from work. So it's like you have this head start almost, because when you start in a new town, you got to learn like little things like who the mayor is or what's the most frustrating traffic spot. And in Edmonton, I had already known that the rat hole was gone, but I already knew about the rat hole. And I think that's a small piece of how you understand your market, is like what's frustrating for them every single day. And now it's the white mud and the Henday and the yellowhead. And, you know, it's a different market now than it was I left 4 years ago. But when I got there, I knew that Oilers are always a huge top of mind conversation. And it was cool. So you could reference things that had happened 20 years earlier on the first day you're cracking the mic. And I think that's so powerful.
Within the first 4 days of me working in Edmonton, somebody called in to say that there was a problem at the rat hole. And I said, "What's the rat hole?" He goes, "You're not from here?" "No." And then he told me to fuck off and go home. Bear listeners, man.
Boy, that was the bear listeners, man. Like, they're rough. Let me tell you, but I'd love to, that's a station I'd love to work on, just so I could see I think I would get attacked pretty easily on the Bear. I think that I'm an easy target for bullies. So like, I think I'd use that to my advantage.
Did the rat hole connect Fort Road? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was a way to connect downtown. So it's been so long, because the construction down there, I think you're right. I think it was Fort Road, but it has been so long since the rat hole even existed that I couldn't tell you, to be honest with you. I'd have to like Google it.
I'll do it after the show, just for my own edification, just to go down memory lane here.
Now, when you were in Edmonton, did they start building the Henday?
Yes.
Because I remember when the Henday was 1/4 mile stretch between the White Mud and Lassard Road, and we would take our 91 Sunfires and in high school, we'd take our beat up cars and we'd race them down that one stretch because nobody was on it.
Yes, that's all it was. And it was a fast strip of land where the police would hang out at some point. They figured it out.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Sound Off Podcast supports Podcasting 2.0. So feel free to send us a boost if you're listening on a newer podcast app. If you don't have a newer podcast app, you can get one at newpodcastapps.com.
And did you do what everybody else in Edmonton does? And that's when they get an opportunity, you leave Edmonton to go to Kelowna.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. We had spent almost 5 years in Edmonton, and they had flipped formats, and it was a tough time for me because I think I was successful at the new format because they wanted us to be content creators, and they wanted us to be not just jocks. And I think that was actually really good for me because I'm a bit of a Swiss Army knife. Like I can do just about anything. I'm a performer, but I was getting up too early every morning to not do a morning show. And I thought it was just, I don't know if it was for me. And I thought maybe I do need a change. Maybe this would be good for me. And Kelowna had a position available. And I thought, I think it's time for me to go somewhere else. I really liked Edmonton. I liked what we were doing there at 92.5, the Chuck, but I wouldn't say that it wasn't for me because I was successful there, but I wanted to go somewhere different. And I think Kelowna was just an awesome change of pace for me. I mean, I work harder here than I probably ever did anywhere else, but just the chance to move to a beautiful place and be there for a few years was a great opportunity. And my wife is from Kelowna. So it was all just it was kind of an easy choice to go there, even though I was on the up with Chorus, but I didn't burn any bridges. I was happy there, but I thought, let's do something for my wife now. And we went to Kelowna and it's been awesome.
What was the job in Kelowna that you took?
They had a position available at 101.5 Easy Rock. And I was already familiar with the format because I had done the format in Golden and I'd already worked for the cluster. So I had an in there with Shanine Carr and Ken Kilcullen. He's the one who interviewed me. And obviously Boyd Leader was going to be the PD at the time, also known as Rhubarb Jones.
Or Rutabaga if Graham Hicks mispronounces it or miswrites it in the Edmonton Sun like he did one day, which led to endless jokes. Yeah.
I heard that story. Man. I can't wait. I hope Boyd listens to this.
Oh, he listens.
Oh yeah, he does.
Oh yeah. I mean, the one day he makes the paper and they call him Rutabaga.
I've been called worse. I've been called Stefan Keppler, so I can't really make it. Like, Rutabaga is still pretty good though. That's again. Anyways, so I got an afternoon job in Kelowna working with, Rhubarb was my PD, and he kind of just he threw the reins off me. He's like, go do whatever. And I loved that because I felt like I could just, again, go back out there and fail. So I kind of hit a reset button on my career that way. Not saying I didn't learn anything in Edmonton. I learned so much in Edmonton. Like I learned about PPM markets, about having a niche and I had so many tools in my bag going to Kelowna that I took all of those tools and I, again, kind of just threw them to the ground and just started playing with this empty canvas. And so Boyd was amazing for me there in that way. And then obviously 9 months into my tenure there, COVID hit. And so it was a tough time there going into a studio when the roads are completely empty. But again, you got to look at every experience as a learning experience. And I learned that, what I had picked up in Golden about being part of the community, I need to do that here. I just need to do it differently. And that's when more came about with my career. But to start, I thought, Kelowna was a great change of scenery, great change of pace. And I learned. And that's, I think, if you learn every day, you're going to be so successful in this business. If there's any young broadcaster who says, what does it take to be successful? I say, learn every day, go in and be willing to fail. Keith Johnstone, he's recently passed, but he's one of the greatest improvisers and the godfather of improvisation. He would tell his students every day, say out loud, we suck and we love to fail.
Let me ask you about rebranding, because I know you had to sit through one when you went from Fresh to Chuck. And I want the perspective of somebody who's a little bit younger in radio to let me know what a rebrand is. So these decisions get made by older people who are likely 50 plus, who have a lot of radio experience, and they believe that you can come out and one book the whole thing or rebuild it in within a year we can hit this particular level. But I can't remember a rebrand in the last 5 years that has had that sort of success or projected success. So what is it about rebranding a radio station that doesn't work anymore?
I don't know. I think rebranding is an interesting choice because I feel like people are scanning the dial so much that they forget what brand they're even listening to. I think rebranding is great in the sense that you can refresh, you can put a fresh coat of paint on whatever it is you're doing, and you can take a tired brand and you can give it a fresh coat of paint, right? But if you're not going to change the music and if you're going after the same demographic, what are you doing? You're kind of wasting your time, I think. You're just wasting money. So I've been a part of a few rebrands now, and the main takeaway I have is that it galvanizes your station. Everyone gets excited about a rebrand. Listeners get excited. You can do so many cool things when you rebrand. Let's look at Sonic in Vancouver. That was probably one of the coolest stunts I've ever seen. And 92.5, when we rebranded with the Chuck, we did Heritage Days, and we were down there exposing the brand to new people. And you can be successful if you have a great launch. You need to be solid, though, right after that launch. You can't just hit the gas and do the quarter mile. You need to hit the gas and do the Le Mans. You need to be going. And then you need to keep doing that. I think radio is all about keeping your foot on the pedal. I don't know if I answered your question there, though.
You did quite well, actually. Very well.
I think rebranding is the toughest thing. I've been a part of a couple. I'm so fortunate that when rebrands happen, I've been always a part of the conversation because I've been on so many formats. I understand different demographics. I guess you could call me a yes man, but I believe that you can make content for everyone. You just need to understand who it is you're talking to and build your material out for your global audience. And that means for everyone. So your company might say that you're doing your show for 25-54 females. Well, I look at it like, okay, we're going to put it through the lens of a mother of two, but also I'm a man. So we're going to find ways to inject all of these things. And that's kind of the cool part about radio is that, you know, you want to be able to talk to anyone in the car. You should be right next to anyone.
And you touched on COVID. What do you think radio's legacy is coming out of COVID as you look back at like the two really bizarre years? And you don't have to speak for the whole radio industry. I just want to know your experience and how COVID landed for you. You're in Kelowna, it's a medium-sized market. It's a high-touch market. What do you think radio's legacy is going through that from your experience?
That's such a tough one because COVID was really, really hard. Every radio host I talked to, they struggled. I mean, we all struggled as a community. Everyone had their own separate struggles as well. I think there were some radio hosts who went, I could do my show from home. This is great, but it's lonely, you know, and you don't realize how lonely it can get. To combat the loneliness, I spent a lot of time on social media, and I took my social media presence and I put it on the air, and I created a community of good news in the Okanagan, just sharing all the good stuff. And I actually got the idea from Fred Kennedy, Fearless Fred, because Fred had done shutdown shout outs. And I was like, that is a great idea. Let's go positive. Let's do that. That was great for the first year. But as we got into the political turmoil and the
convoy shit show,
yeah, like it just got so tough. And now you're jumping on the air. People are driving around. People are listening to you. And you have to be very careful with your words. You have to be very careful about what you're saying, not just to offend people, but not to incite panic, not to incite, outrage, but you're there to be their friend. It was tough because there were so many people calling us on the air and getting mad at us, calling us cowards for not talking about the convoy, calling us cowards for not telling people to get a vaccine. Didn't matter what stance you took, you weren't going to win. And that was the difficult part about radio there. Like what had happened was we had flipped formats in January of 2021, and they moved me to the morning show. And I had taken over for a heritage morning show. And let me tell you, I was not a liked guy, a liked person for the first 3 months. And my favorite comment about the morning show was juvenile trash. And what I liked about it, though, is I'm on the right path. I'm trying to get I'm trying to go after people my age, talk about what things that mean more to us. But I wasn't well liked. So it was a lonely 3 to 6 months, especially bringing in all of that other stuff. I remember saying on the air, I got vaccinated. I'm pretty happy about it. I shouldn't have done that.
And I think maybe you got that blowback during that period because radio is so powerful. And there are people who want to be acknowledged for what they're going through. 2 years of going through the convoy. Listen, 2 years of going through COVID. I'm no fan of any of that stuff, but I get it. I think when somebody calls you up like that, they're just asking to be heard. That's all.
Yeah, I've done. Sid Smith from Chorus in Edmonton did a great job of like helping me, and I only had maybe a dozen or two good conversations with Sid, so it's not like he was my dad, but like he was really good at listening to people. When I saw angry hosts come into his office, and I don't think Sid would say a word. He'd let them say their piece, and then they would go about what to do next. And that I kind of took that approach with listeners calling up for the radio show. So if you were upset and they told me what they hated about me, about whatever's going on, I said, first off, thanks for calling. Thank them for taking the time to tell you how they feel, whether you agree or not. They have passion and they want to call you. That's great. Let's use that. And then, if you disagree, gently talk about why you disagree, but also ask them questions. Ask them, what's life like right now for you? Because maybe something's not great at home for them. And maybe they just lost their job. Maybe they're not necessarily upset we're not talking about the convoy. They're upset because they're not sure if they're going to have a dinner tonight. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot that's going on in people's lives that we forget because we're always thinking about ourselves. We're always thinking about what's going on in our heads, but we're not thinking about them. You have to ask yourself, what took them the courage to call into a radio show knowing they could be recorded and put on the air right away? That takes courage.
Yeah, they have a story to tell and they want to tell it, or at least have it acknowledged, which kind of dovetails into the more recent events that you've been going through in Kelowna, which has been on fire for the better part of a little while, where West Kelowna, fire jumped over the river, and you're facing yet again a forest fire disaster. I think it was 10 years ago that number of homes were burned down in Kelowna.
The bigger one was about 20 years ago. Yeah. It was yeah.
I do remember that one. I guess I don't remember how long ago it was, but
feels like 10 years ago, Matt. It does.
Yeah. I'm thinking of my buddy Bruce Davis, who did Sales at the Bear, whose house was decimated in the whole thing. And yeah, you're right. It was 20 years ago. It was 2003. Oh my goodness.
And it was almost 20 years ago to the day when the next fire had happened. And this one was big.
And here you are on the radio. And here you are in the face of Facebook that is not going to be sharing any of your links and news. And it prompted me to sort of say, hey, Facebook, maybe you should just let this one go and make it happen for people. You might save a life in the process. But radio in a time of emergency, there's moments where I downplay it and I say radio's not there, but I think Kelowna was there for it.
Oh, absolutely. Radio was there for everyone. So I was on vacation when the fire happened. And when I saw it had jumped the lake, I told my wife, we got to go. We're gone. We're going back to Kelowna. As I'm packing the car, my program director, Amy Gilbert, Amy was like, she texted me. She goes, where are you? Can you come in? And I said, I'm packing the car. I'll be in Kelowna in 6 hours. You put me where you need me. Because of the news on Facebook being cut, because of all that, they're going to come to us because we are real time and we have warmth and inflection and we can guide you through what is going on. So I get to the station and Amy throws me on 99.9 Virgin Radio and she goes, you're going to do afternoons. I've never done Virgin. Okay, whatever. I go on there and I do an afternoon show and I don't think anything of it. What I do is I report on the fires, I report on what's going on, and I keep a pretty somber but safe tone. I don't want people panicking. What was really neat was when I hopped off the air, that night things kind of had calmed down. I was going to be on AM 1150 that night on the talk radio station, but I wasn't. But I'll never forget being at the grocery store, running into a P1 on my station, Move 1015, and she said, when I heard you were on Virgin Radio, I was scanning the stations. She heard me. She left it on because she goes, I didn't want my kids to be scared in the car, but I wanted to know what was going on because I was driving around that whole afternoon. And that is why people listen to the radio. That is why we need to be there for them. For moments like that. If you wanted the up-to-date information, you could have been on AM 1150, but she wasn't in trouble. It was her friends that were in trouble, and she was worried for them. It was a scary time, though. From downtown Kelowna, we can see West Kelowna and West Bank. And I saw houses just blow up across the lake. And I don't think I'll ever get that out of my head. You know, that was a very scary moment for me, because I thought these embers can jump the lake, because they did 2 nights ago. You know, these houses are just, they would go. It was another learning experience, because I need to be there for whoever's listening, whoever's there to hang out. And I need to be there next to them in the car to explain the situation. And then the next day, I was on AM 1150 board opping. Never board opped in my life, for our station general manager, Ken Kilcullen. And I learned a lot listening to Ken interview people throughout the day, talk about the fires and how he had such cadence and tact. And I don't think I would have had that. So, I mean, I learned a lot from him, but I was hopping on with him every now and then to say a few words. But then, you run into listeners and they're like, hey, I heard you on this station, I heard you on that station. And you get a thank you from them. And the last thing I was wanting was a thank you for reporting on fires. But we got it, and it was pretty neat. But we've had friends lose their homes, and it's been hard watching them go through the grieving process, because you're seeing them go through it in real time. And so this is just another one of those events that brings me closer to everyone in Kelowna, because we have a shared experience. And not saying that COVID wasn't a shared experience, it was, but natural disasters are scary, because you don't know what's going to happen within 5 minutes. I mean, the fires are still burning right now, and it's still scary. You can see the whole mountain smoldering, but there's a lot of people who are back in their homes, and that's good. But it's going to be a long road to recovery.
Yeah, and I've been very skeptical about radio's role in an emergency. So if we were to look at what happened in Hawaii, there was no radio role. It happened very quickly. The officials did not call the radio stations to make any announcements. Full disclosure, I'm a station voice at a radio station in Maui, and they haven't really touched their Facebook page in 2 years, and the station is fully automated with my voice. So I don't know how you build a rapport when you're running a station like that. And if they hear this, I'm probably fired from that particular job, but whatever. That's just the way I think of it. It sort of speaks to the people of Kelowna and the relationship that they have with trust in radio, why they're calling you to vent about a convoy protest. And when there's a disaster, they're going straight to the radio to find it. And fuck Facebook. First of all, Facebook is not a real-time social media platform. X is. I don't think you need it as much as you think.
No, you don't.
If you're going to do radio right, you don't need much of a Facebook presence.
Facebook's been frustrating in the radio industry for people who want to post their bits to convert listeners, because I think social media is meant to convert. It's been difficult for anyone running station promotions to get the word out there, I guess. No, I don't think Facebook has any bearing on this whatsoever. I think it's been tough, and there's a lot of companies that have been hurt, and that's awful. It sucks. But when the fires, I'm going to bring up the fires. When the fires were happening, you'd be scrolling through Facebook and you'd see posts from 3 days ago, 4 days ago. And then all of a sudden we had a ton of misinformation being thrown around on Facebook, because somebody goes, well, I heard the fire jumped the lake. Well, that was actually 5 days ago. That's irrelevant now. Or somebody would say, I heard the bridge was closed. And the actual information was it was closed at 1 a.m. for a couple of hours for maintenance, for them to prepare if the fire comes down near the bridge, because the bridge needs to stay open. That's the bridge that connects Kelowna and West Kelowna. And that's a very big artery for the Okanagan. Facebook was to me, there was a lot of disinformation or misinformation being thrown out there, because Facebook's algorithm, is always thinking about you. They're not thinking about real time. Twitter's great for real time. You're absolutely right. But radio is the only medium where it's all in real time. You can't just sit there on your dashboard and hit rewind or fast forward. No, it's right there, right up to the moment. So when you're getting news on the radio, it's up to the moment as best as it can. And that's why we give time checks. I think we might need to go back to giving time checks. I think we should do time checks on Facebook, maybe. Maybe that would help.
Somebody told you to stop doing time checks?
No, I'm indifferent about time checks, because I don't know if it's super necessary or not, because there's a clock right there on their radio.
But it flashes 12.
Yeah.
Some of them do.
It's a good point.
I guess if somebody from Facebook were here, they would say, we don't really do news anyway. We're just delivering what other people are saying. And so I would probably say we should get rid of this piece of legislation because it's misguided and a whole bunch of other things anyway. Just my take. That's not a question. You don't have to answer that.
It's a fair opinion, though.
From what you experienced through the Kelowna fires, what do you think your station or the stations in Kelowna can do better to keep people engaged with radio?
We as hosts need to be ready to hop on the air at any time. I don't mean be on call 24/7 because you need to live your life and you need to go have vacations. You need to look after yourself. But I think companies need to be ready to go into safe mode or whatever it is to be there for the listener when things happen. Radio is such an intimate medium, and it always will be, as is podcasting. But, when there's a flood, people aren't going to go click on their favorite podcast, or they're not going to go to Facebook. They're probably going to go look outside, and then they're probably going to drive away from the flood. Who's going to be there? It's radio. It will always be radio. They will be the first thing people check into.
Stephen, thanks so much for doing this and sharing the recent experience of the wildfires and as well your entire career. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate you as well. There's a promo you guys did at the Bear. I believe you were there, where you guys invited people to drive their junker cars up to the lot, and you were going to give somebody a new car. Can you tell me about that? Because I want to hear your side of it.
I think if it was a piece of shit car, we were going to give you a new car. And I think that was played off the Adam Sandler piece of shit car. Yeah. And then we were going to give somebody a brand new car. Get rid of your piece of shit car. That was it.
That's how radio is powerful. It was like 23 years ago, and I remember it from when I was in high school. I remember when Sonic launched in Edmonton and they played Nirvana, and I said, oh my gosh, this is my music. You don't forget moments like that. So I hope one day I create a moment like that for somebody and they decide to get into the business, whether it be radio, whether it be television, film, whether it be stage acting, anything in performing. I hope. That's my hope in life.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The Sound Off podcast is written and hosted by Matt Kundle. Produced by Evan Serminski. Edited by Chloe Emo Lane. Social media by Aiden Glassy. Another great creation from the Sound Off Media Company. There's always more at soundoffpodcast.com.